The accounts shared on this podcast, including this episode, reflect the guests' thoughtful recollections and opinions of experiences perceived and occurring over many years, including childhood memories, which may be fallible and limited by perspective and trauma. Persons may have different memories regarding certain events.
So I remember just walking up to that porch, and there were, you'd have to have an arc welder who takes 10 dimes and welds them together so you have this, looks like a ruler that's just all dimes that are just like glued together, but they're not glued together, they're actually welded together. So you have these 10 dimes that are side by side, making up, a 4 or 5 inch strand of dimes. So I see that, I see what's obviously stains. And I knew those stains hadn't been there. Or maybe this whole feeling that I've been having is just saying, this is just too weird. Mm-hmm. And I remember the screen door, being able to turn it and open, and then trying to do the door handle to come on in, and it was locked. So I closed it. And so then I just went around the garage that was facing, that was attached to the house, that they'd been turned into a room, and going through that gate, and then following it back around to the back of the other garage. And that's when Mr. Kirkland was, Mr. Kirkland, who was our next door neighbor, great man. I tried the back doors first. There was no getting in. And what was weird, I remember that the drapes on the sliding glass door, I could see in to that very informal living room that you and I had fled from. Mm-hmm. But I couldn't see around. I couldn't see anything else. And just enough daylight coming through the front window so you could see inside. And that's when I walked back around, and Mr. Kirkland just told me, he asked me, Mike, what are you doing here? I said, man, I just got in. I've been on a trip with my best friend. And he said, well, you need to go back where you came from. So now I just go back the way I came.
That 13-year-old boy walked a mile back from where he came, not knowing whose blood spatter covered his porch or what those dimes meant. He was the middle of 3 boys who had experienced more in their short lives than most ever do. And now this. Their family was not always so troubled. It started out like a storybook with high school classmates who took a liking to one another. Kenneth was the 3rd of 5 siblings. He loved to read and would stay up reading until there was no fire left in the fireplace. He was a good student and even skipped a grade according to his sister. He was tall, thin, handsome, and friendly. Joy was a lively child who had 4 siblings. Her mother struggled with depression. Her older sister remembers that when their mom went to have her 5th baby, she warned her kids that she was likely to not make it through this delivery, and she didn't. So, these siblings left without a mother struggled, and their dad eventually remarried. Joy always said that her stepmother was mean to her. Joy, with her black hair and shining blue eyes, was a very smart young lady and could solve any problem. One day she missed the bus, and she drove herself to school, although she was way too young to drive. This ability to keep moving forward would serve her well in life.
That's where they met. Dad was FFA, she was whatever, and that's the point where they fell in love. And Dad decided he was going to drop out of Detroit High School and go and make a living in order that he could get his bride-to-be to come down and live. As a matter of fact, I think they got married in high school. I mean, Mom was still in high school when she got married. Okay. Dad had already dropped out. Mom did her senior year and got her diploma.
Okay.
And then Dad was going to make a life for them where he could find work in Dallas. He went to South Oak Cliff
Oh.
and started working there. I believe his mom and dad, our grandparents, didn't own the bakery. They worked in the bakery.
Okay.
But I think Dad, after that, got a normal job at East Texas Motor Freight.
Okay.
He worked on the docks driving a forklift, and he got promoted to being like the foreman on the night shift to make sure all the trucks were getting loaded and all that stuff. And it was cool.
The couple settled down in Mesquite, Texas, a suburb of Dallas. First, they lived in a house on a street called Desco, where they had their firstborn son, Ken.
I think my older brother Ken was born on Desco, which was a home in far south Mesquite.
Okay.
It was in what we call Old Mesquite.
Okay.
If you were from there, you were a Mesquite skeeter. You went to Mesquite High School.
Okay.
That's where this house was located. It was called the Desco home because it was on Desco.
Okay.
I was born there, me and Ken both, but I don't really ever remember anything about it. I was too young. Hula was a home that we had in North Mesquite. Mom and Dad had moved on the other side of Mesquite. It was probably a little 1,200 square foot home. It was on a street called Hula.
Okay.
So we just call it the Hula House.
They had brought 2 other sons into their family, Mike and then Richard. The home on Hula was a new house that they filled with new things, and they had a new car. Things were looking good for this family.
When they brought Richard home from the hospital as an infant.
And so how old were you?
Well, that's a good question. I think I was about 5.
Okay.
Yeah, 5 and a half.
Okay.
Yeah. And like we discussed, my memory at the time is that I really do remember that I went into the room and thought that I could just get him to play with me.
Yeah.
In the crib. And I've explained that I don't remember that with Mike, and I guess it's because you were too young. But I knew we played together, and I just thought when Richard came home that we would just play with him, and that wasn't going to be the case.
With 3 boys running around, craziness filled the house.
Well, my first memory, I guess, would be that I can really draw on would have been my older brother Ken having a birthday party. I think he was in 1st or 2nd grade. We were on Hula. And I remember coming out and just completely disrupting it. Just acting out completely. I was standing in front of the TV with whatever show they wanted to watch. Mm-hmm. My mom, who wasn't the greatest disciplinarian in the world, was trying to calm me down, but no one was having any of it until the point where Ken basically just kind of threw me on the ground and sent me to my room. Okay. So that's the very first kind of memory I have. I know my mom said that the first thing that I should remember is she said that my first words were, "Ken, you be the Batman, and I'll be the Robin." And I've often looked back at that from like when that show was evolved in 1966. That it would have been at least a couple of years before I could even speak. So if that was 1968 and I was born in 63, I think that's a little hard to fathom because I would have been 5. Mm-hmm. And surely I had spoken before that time. Yeah. But it was always a good memory, and I always try to tell that story to other people. But I definitely remember early days in Hula.
So about how old were you when he had that birthday party?
I think I was around 5.
You were 5. Okay.
I remember being so young that I had a little service station that could have little Hot Wheels, and just literally being on my knees in my room playing with that over and over again.
I don't remember that birthday party, but my first memories, I was probably younger, and I don't know why, than you and yours, but it's of being in a bedroom with Mike and my mom playing with the fan, making those noises you make with the fan. Clearly it's daylight, sun's coming in. Pretty sure we're on Hula. I don't know where else it could be. So that, and then I confuse timing, which was first, with the time that I drank like paint thinner.
Yes, you did.
Gasoline, paint thinner, thinking it was Kool-Aid because they were building a model and dipping the brush in there, and it was like red or something, and so I
thought it was Kool-Aid.
Yeah. Who's they?
Ken, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, Ken was doing it.
Yeah.
I think Mom had set him up to help him That was pure, Rich. That was pure gasoline. There was
Oh,
no
my
thinner.
goodness.
You drank, and it wasn't like unleaded. It was regular
Oh.
ethyl that you drank.
Oh my goodness.
You
Well,
remember what happened after you did it?
I really don't.
You don't?
No, I
Oh my
know that there
gosh.
was some swift action taken by somebody somewhere, and I don't really know what happened.
Man, you got sicker and all get out. I mean, you started coughing really bad. It took your breath away. Mom started freaking out, thinking we need to call an ambulance. Dad was nowhere to be found, so we took you to the commode where you just kind of let it all go. I suggested that we were to give you a Winston and just light it up for you just to see what would happen. But Mom was a little, didn't really want to do that.
Burn all that gasoline out of me.
It scared us when that happened because, yeah, it looked just like Kool-Aid.
That's my fault. And in less than 25 words, we'll just state that I built model cars. And model cars required glue, the kind of glue that you had to get permission to buy.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it required paint to do them right. And the paint was enamel paint, and the only thing that would allow you to clean your paintbrush was paint thinner.
Yeah.
And so by the time I had blue, red, orange, whatever paint, and I've got the little Dixie cup and I'm mixing that in there, it looked like punch. And,
Yeah.
he took a drink of it.
And so, what do you remember of your family at that time? Like, was it pretty normal? Was it what
Yes.
you know to be normal now?
I would have suspected it was normal.
Okay.
I think you and I talked a little bit about the fact that I can remember that my mom and dad seemed to be normal. School was normal. My mom, I can remember times when Mom was very participatory
Good.
in the PTA and in my class as a 7 and 8 year old. I think I also told you that I have a very good memory of them fighting at one point in time over. It was really the only time that I felt like that there was something wrong, and it was my mom got upset and was crying because my dad had been ugly to her, and I heard him. I don't remember what was said, but I just knew he had been ugly to her about buying something that she should not have bought that was not necessary when she went to the grocery store.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking, this is not right. And everything obviously went back to normal, if you will.
Right.
But I have a real good memory of
Yeah.
that was just not good.
Okay.
And I remember thinking, I didn't need to see that.
Yeah. So you went to school and your mom participated, and so you remember your mom as like a normal mom,
Yeah.
making dinner.
And as someone that other moms
Right.
thought was somebody that was taking care of things.
Wow.
That they looked up to.
Wow. That's awesome. So that was the first indication that something might be bad. Were there other signs as time went on?
I think we talked about that she just seemed to be tired.
Yes.
Is the best phrase I could use. I know that I just vaguely remember that she was having lots of issues with her teeth. And so there was teeth that were being pulled, and but that she just always seemed to lay on the couch. And I know we have video of that.
Right.
But it's not the video that I remember. I know the couch. I can see her laying there. And even the night that we had our big night at the PTA, she came home and she had to get on that couch. And hindsight, looking back, is it's you can just see a depression that was there.
Yeah. Life for this mom of 3 boys was hard, but she tried to raise them well.
Yeah, I
Okay.
started at that time. Kindergarten was not a requirement
Right.
for the independent school districts to do. But I do remember at 5, my mom driving me to like Ferguson and I-30
Right.
closer to downtown Dallas, where there was a kindergarten there that she paid for.
Oh, wow.
So that was some of the early education I got. But my first Hula experience was Iron Range Elementary.
Okay.
Which was, I don't know, you could walk to it. It was probably a mile away.
Okay.
So you went to range when we were on Hula.
Yeah, I started first grade. That was Miss Batts. Was my teacher.
And what about you? You didn't go to the private school that he got to have.
No, that was news to me. In fact, that's.
I've been trying to
neat.
keep that from you,
Yeah,
just so
that's
that you would
neat to
feel
know.
So you're
bad even
jealous.
in your old age right now. My two distinct memories on Hula was in 1969. I know the date only because history tells me it's when it occurred. I remember when the astronauts were going to walk on the moon.
Okay.
Neil Armstrong's first steps and all that. I remember seeing that on a black and white TV being given to us live, and I remember going out to my backyard next to our slide of the swing set and looking up to see if I could see the lunar capsule up there and somehow make him out and see if they're making a safe journey home.
You know, that's 50 years ago.
I know,
like,
it's 50
right
years
now.
ago. That's right. So that was my first real clear memory. And I think the other thing, which to Richard's point, kind of led to some of the demise of mom and dad as we know them. I can't say I ever remember having a normal life on Hula. I think there was a couple of times where I can remember us surrounding the kitchen table and maybe mom making a meal. That was the only civilized, really, that I can remember of mom and dad.
Joy struggled to keep up with the responsibilities of being a mother and a wife. Over the years, her spirit slowly faded. She eventually became a shell of who she used to be, hiding the pain until it became too much to bear.
I have a vivid memory of people coming to get her. And they came in the door, and I don't want to make this sound too dramatic because we've seen television shows and whatnot, but they pretty much were orderlies. I mean, they weren't necessarily dressed in white with black belts and looked like milkmen, but they were orderlies, you could tell. And they sat down with her on the couch, and it didn't take her long to pick up. Now, back up, and I think I do also remember that at one point, I remember going, as we discussed, going to Presbyterian Hospital.
Right.
Where she was, what I've been told and what I try to remember is that she spent several weeks there, and I don't really know to what avail. My assumption's always been that money would have been an issue in a private facility like that. And again, don't have any idea what kind of interaction her and my dad were having.
Right.
Our dad was what they were going through. But I just remember that they came to get her to take her to Terrell. And when she realized what was taking place, she ran out into the front yard. And they had to take her. And my little bit of memory about what was going on at the other hospital, I knew she was going to the hospital.
Okay.
Yeah, and that didn't really realize the significance of it.
Right.
But that she was going to have to leave. But I always thought it was going to probably be okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
But she came back from that.
My memory gets pretty vague
Okay.
there, but yes, I remember that we visited her quite a lot.
Okay.
In Terrell and when we were at Hula, and that ultimately, though, yes, she would be in and out, and just always. Easy to say now because I can think of it as an adult, but that there was always a struggle there, and it's almost as if she knew she was going to end up going back. Yeah.
I don't think y'all remember her going in and out.
I do, now that we mention it. I don't remember them coming to pick her up. I just remember noticing that something wasn't right based on some of the arguments. I remember there was a specific Christmas to where Dad was riding a 10-speed bike through the hallway of Hula, and he cut almost his toenail off or something, and Mom was always so worried about everything, and it was just him doing that, and you could always see that at some point Mom began to almost clench at everything. But I remember the arguments. And then I do remember walking home from Iron Range with the cops being in the front driveway.
Okay.
And them bringing my dad out with handcuffs behind him. So my mom had called the police that Dad was being abusive, and the Mesquite police came and got him. I don't think he ever went to jail. I think they drove him around and just talked to him and then brought him back.
Okay.
But it wasn't long after that when things started getting worse.
Okay.
And we were... I can't say I really remember the other worse things that were
Right.
going on. But I can definitely remember that moment when you see your dad walking
Yeah.
out in handcuffs.
Was that like shocking?
I was like, do I turn around? Do I even go home? Well, I really didn't know where to go from there.
Right.
As I'm on the corner, as we could look down the street and see my house. I did the only thing I knew to do, and that was just to keep on coming. And
Were you alone, or did you have someone
I
with
had
you?
no friends with me.
Okay.
They had pretty much stopped at their houses that were a little bit closer to the school, so I was making the rest of my journey.
Right.
And when I got from Bird Street to Hula Street and looked to my left, I saw them bringing Dad out with handcuffs.
Did he look at you?
He did not look at me. They put him in the back of the car. The car's left, and then I made my way on to in the house.
Was your mom there?
She was.
And was she disheveled or?
Yes. And she had told me that I didn't see the abuse, obviously.
Right.
But she had told me that was what was going on, that she had to call the police.
Wow.
So
That's a lot for a little boy.
but really, when I look at the collateral damage from that, I don't remember a lot about, this is going to lead to this, or what's going to happen next.
Right.
It was just kind of like there was initial shock. Okay, I remember Dad returning. There seemed to be some civilized conversation as far as I could comprehend. But that was the two biggest moments.
Yeah.
Moon launch and then seeing your dad come out in handcuffs.
Yeah,
That was a hard thing
those
to
were huge.
digest.
The Hula days were coming to an end. Joy returned to the mental hospital again and again, and her family started tearing at the seams. It was traumatizing for her young children to visit her at the hospital, where adults were acting in strange ways.
Honestly, it could have been because there was a lobby on the second floor where you could sit, but then there were these two doors that would have to be opened.
right.
Yeah.
And I do recall that door being opened and just seeing bodies laying in the hallway.
Yeah.
It was like, just imagine One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a...
Well, it had its reputation of being, the proverbial, we're going to take you to Terrell,
Yeah.
was what everyone would tell everybody back in the
Yeah.
day.
Mental health treatment was very different in the early 1970s, and Joy was given the common treatments of the day. Her hospitalization fractured her marriage with Kenneth, and later they divorced and moved away from the house on Hula Street.
I really have one memory, and it is a picture memory, is all it is, of being in a car knowing that I was leaving Hula, we were leaving Hula, and we weren't going back to Hula.
Okay.
And we were going to that apartment that we had looked at. And that's as best I could do at the time.
I remember having a conversation with my dad that I just didn't quite understand why we were moving to an apartment. And I knew nothing about mortgages or home equity, but it was just like, and apartments were very popular back then, but it was like, this is our home.
Right.
And it just seemed like it was obvious to me at 10 years old
Right.
that something
Yeah.
was about to transition.
Right.
Because it just didn't make sense, even as a 10-year-old, that we were leaving this place where we had these memories and that we had a house. And I didn't even understand the concept of owning or renting.
Right.
But something was just different about the fact that we were moving to this place where we didn't know anybody.
Right.
And we were all just right there on top of one another. I thought
Right.
that was odd. At some point, that's whenever Mom went back to Terrell.
Okay.
And I can mainly recall this just because we've been told this over the years, was that when she was in Terrell, and I guess this would have been, you can probably look that up if you haven't already. Sometime in 1971, he filed for divorce and had custody of us.
Yeah.
And so I mean, I guess that was at that point in time. You and I have talked about the fact that looking back on it, I may be wrong, but it just makes perfect sense that he knew where this was heading. I mean, that's why we sold the house. We had to have equity in that house. We had to. And whether it was money for this or money for that, or just the fact that they didn't need to have a house whenever they got a divorce.
Right.
It was just clear that was part of the overall, I know what I'm going to have to do here.
On the next episode of Qavah, we will begin following the three sons who watched their parents go separate ways. Mike, Richard, and Ken would go on to experience a childhood full of mysteries, like the blood and the dimes that later stained their porch. Thank you for listening to this episode of Qavah the podcast. We hope you enjoyed it and that you will subscribe, download, and share this on your social media pages and with your family and friends. If you find yourself in a desperate place, it is our desire that you would be able to borrow hope from those who've gone before you and shared their stories. They have exemplified the meaning of Qavah, learning to wait during difficult times to find an eventual positive outcome. I can't express my gratitude for my head writer, Rebecca Gray, and audio engineer, Meredith Douglas. I would not be able to do this without you. For more information, please visit qavahthepodcast.com. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful day.